I did Latin in high school, and every week or two, depending on how much the class hated the current translation, we'll have a whole class dedicated to side tangents to just boost morale a little bit. And in one of them tangents, we landed on the cult of Sibylle. The Romans spent a great deal of money and effort to take this religion into Rome, transported their statues and everything, and within a year they decided to abandon it. Why? Well, the priests were eunuchs, and the Romans loved masculinity. Now, naturally, as this was a high school classroom, the discussion shifted to the castration process of the ancient Romans. Was it just the shaft, just a sack, or did they just chop everything off? And I raised the question, did this process change over time? Just to input my valuable Chinese opinion, and since the Chinese switched between chopping the whole thing off and chopping just a sack. Now, the Chinese had a long history of employing eunuchs. Around 3,000 years ago in the Zhou dynasty, eunuchs has been a part of courtly life. But it was not until the Eastern Han dynasty that the eunuchs had a consistent and considerable amount of power. Why? Because for a long time, the eunuchs were the only group of people the emperors could actually use and get things done with. Now it's time to ask why again. Well, it's because of the shizu, or, the very iffy English translation, the gentry class. And gentries is quite different from European nobles. Obviously, European feudal nobles is a gross oversimplification. Right? These nobles serve vastly different roles and have varied degrees of power in different countries and different eras. But for the sake of comparison, I'm just going to generalize them. And in the West, nobles have hereditary land and titles, they have vassals of their own, and they pay taxes here and there. It wasn't always monetary. Gentries weren't granted hereditary land. They can buy land and properties, but they don't really have a hereditary title that comes along with this hereditary land. They also don't have vassals of their own. They're all technically corresponding to the same emperor. And they all pay, well, they don't pay taxes. They're often just tax collectors themselves. And the most important thing is that they control bureaucratic positions. And the formation of gentries deserves a video of its own. I might do that in the near future, but for now, you just gotta know that they're a product of Chinese dynasties attempting to move away from traditional nobles that possesses land. So the key change, or the key difference here between the gentries and the nobles is that power is not passed through hereditary land and titles. Power is passed through the control of court positions. And this is possible because of the way the Han Dynasty chose its bureaucrats. Since Confucianism became the main political ideology, 察举制 was adopted. And this was just a recommendation system. The whole idea is that people with good morality could make no wrongs. So all you need is respected people with good morality to recommend more people with good morality. And these respected personnels, usually Confucius scholars, either comes directly from the gentry class, so they're part of gentry families, or they received enough benefits from gentries that they only recommend people who are a part of the gentries. So now, not only do the Eastern Han emperors lack control in court because the gentries kind of just control the court positions, they usually die pretty early. Only 3 emperors out of the 12 made it past 35. And 2 of them are the first 2 emperors of the dynasty. And there are many theories on why this is the case. One being that a lot of lead was used in the building. But it's still a historical mystery. And short-lived emperors leaves queen mothers and the rest of her family with a great amount of power. This then leaves emperors who want power for themselves with really only one route. They have to rely on eunuchs, who are the only people they have contact daily in the palace and will listen to them, because a eunuch can only get power directly from the emperor. Now let's introduce some key players before we start talking about the fall of the Eastern Han dynasty. One of the biggest gentry families in the Eastern Dynasty is the Yuan family. They had four generations where they had a person from the family who held one of the three most important positions in court. So basically, they had four generations straight of prime ministers. And with great power comes even greater power. The amount of connections and people who took benefits from the Yuan family make them the most influential family in the Eastern Han Dynasty. They also have a good relationship with the eunuchs, and the only thing that's stopping them from taking the country for themselves is military power and the fact that the emperor technically still holds the supreme order. And the leader of this fifth generation of the Yuan dynasty is Yuan Shao. For the eunuchs, Jian Shuo is the head of the West Garden Army, which is the strongest imperial army that's residing in the capital. He Jing is the uncle of the current emperor, who is just 14, and he's technically got control of all of the imperial armies, but really he doesn't have control over the West Garden Army. The beginning of the end started with the death of Emperor Ling. Now, he was far from a good or successful emperor, which wasn't entirely his fault. The gentries had full control of his court, but he also really liked just playing around and not caring about politics. And he had to rely on the eunuchs exclusively. Well, as we mentioned before, they're the only ones that are truly loyal to him because the source of power comes directly and only from him. My favorite quote from him is that Zhang Rang is my dad, Zhao Rong is my mom, and those are two very powerful eunuchs. He was only 33 when he died, and his heir was only 14. He actually wanted the second son to be heir, well, because he liked the son's mother a little bit more. And this one's clearly smarter than his first son. But it was too late for him to do anything, and on his deathbed, he leaves a will to his most trusted eunuch, Jian Shuo. As we mentioned before, Jian Shuo is the head of the West Garden Army, and the West Garden Army is created literally to limit He Jing's power. Emperor Ling didn't want He Jing to hold the entire imperial army. And being the loyal eunuch he is, Jian Shuo immediately starts to plot against He Jing because he is the biggest obstacle against putting Emperor Ling's second son onto the throne. So Jian Shuo organizes an assassination attempt on He Jing, and He Jing escapes narrowly because a minor officer tips him off. At first, he didn't really do anything about it. He was kind of afraid of the eunuchs, mainly because he was kind of put into power by the eunuchs. You see, he was a butcher before he became the uncle of the current emperor, and his sister only became the empress because the eunuchs recommended her. And a big reason for his sister to become the empress and to be recommended is that he was a butcher. He had no connections, he had no name, and he had no extra power. Now, what the eunuchs didn't expect is that Yuan Shao became friends with He Jing. And he starts suggesting to He Jing that you gotta act on this betrayal by the eunuchs, and you gotta take revenge, and you gotta kill them all. And the eunuchs hear of this, and they give up Jian Shuo and his military power to him. So He Jing succeeds in exterminating Jian Shuo and also gaining the military power of the West Garden Army. But Yuan Shao doesn't end it there. He keeps suggesting and writing to He Jing to kill all of the eunuchs. Job's not done. Killing Jian Shuo isn't enough. And so He Jing goes to talk to his sister, the Queen Mother, who told him, nah, that's a bad idea. Doing that disrupts the balance of the court. With the eunuchs gone, we're going to have to face the gentries one-on-one. And Yuan Shao then tells He Jing that, these eunuchs, they've tried to kill you once. If you don't kill them now, they'll still try to kill you. It was around this time, He Jing's sister, the Queen Mother, and his brother, He Miao, still tried to talk some sense into him. Right? There's no legitimate power clash between He Jing and the eunuchs now that they don't have military power. Yuan Shao then convinces He Jing, I know what you're scared of. You're scared that we can't beat them down in one go. So let's call for the regional armies to come and scare the Queen Mother. And then you can justify killing the eunuchs. So He Jing agrees. Now Yuan Shao successfully convinced He Jing that his sister is actually not on the same side as him. And calling for in the regional armies will publicize the conflicts between the eunuchs and the He Jing, and will basically push them to a full-on fight. And once they battle it out, Yuan Shao's uncle is in the military department. He himself now is a commander in He Jing's army, and his brother Yuan Shu is also a general. So if they full-on battle it out and cause enough damage to each other, He Jing and the eunuchs, the Yuan family can fully capture the power vacuum. The only risky move is calling in the regional armies, but Yuan Shao believed that he could scare them off. So, He Jing calls for the regional armies, and eventually the Queen Mother complies. She removes all of the eunuchs' court positions and orders them to return home. Yuan Shao then began playing the devil's advocate once again, telling He Jing that job's still not finished. You just gotta kill them, man. You can't let them leave. Killing them solves the issue. He Jing doesn't listen this time because he's got full-on victory. Right? Killing the eunuchs did not matter in this situation. They've lost their court positions. They've lost their power. There's really no point. So Yuan Shao then sends orders in He Jing's name to regional governments that they have to kill eunuchs' relatives. And now the eunuchs have their backs against the wall, and they were forced to stand together. And they were furious, justifiably too, because first, they surrendered Jianshuo and the military power to He Jing. They've surrendered the court positions, and they've essentially helped He Jing into the place that he is today. They've pretty much elected his sister to be empress and queen mother. And he still wants to kill them and their families. So they plotted another assassination attempt against He Jing, and this time they succeed. When He Jing was called into the palace by the Queen Mother, the eunuchs caught him without his guards and pulled a Caesar on him. And now Yuan Shao has legitimate reason to take out the eunuchs. So he does. And in the midst of the chaos, the Queen Mother escapes the capital with the current emperor and his brother, the prince. Now, Yuan Shao's master plan almost worked, but the most infamous fat man in Chinese history entered the stage. Dong Zhuo came all the way to Luoyang, and as fate wills it, he encounters the Queen Mother alongside the prince and the emperor, and naturally he takes them under his protection. And at this point, Dong Zhuo doesn't really have any advantages over Yuan Shao, as he only brought 3,000 men with him. Now, here's where family and a little bit of luck comes into play. He Jing's remaining forces were up for grabs, and they just committed a crime. They killed He Miao, who was He Jing's brother, and they killed him because they thought he was conscribing with the eunuchs, and that's what caused the death of their old boss He Jing. Now, after this hot-headedness, they now are scared to be punished by Yuan Shao, who only ordered for the massacre of the eunuchs, but they've killed a government-appointed general. So they contacted Dong Zhuo through his brother Dong Ming, who was a general that accompanied them in killing He Miao. Now Dong Zhuo has, and besides them, Dong Zhuo also gained the control of another regional army through none other than Lu Bu, who might or might not have been an old accomplice of Dong Zhuo. The history on it is quite iffy. But anyways, he kills his old boss and swears fealty to Dong Zhuo. So in a couple of days, Dong Zhuo gained control over a powerful army that outclassed Yuan Shao's, and he has the emperor and the queen mother under his control. So he enters Luoyang, and he basically calls for the removal of the current emperor and to appoint the emperor's brother onto the throne as a new emperor. So it all works out for Emperor Ling in the end, right? His heir that he wants to put on the throne enters the throne. And Dong Zhuo does this because this kid was only 9. He was easier to control, and he doesn't really have any relatives around him. And this leads to arguably the best moment in Yuan Shao's career. I'm just gonna roll the clip here.
欲为洪龙王， 立陈留王为帝，有不从者，斩！
当今朝廷初定，赵尔等入京，以为辅佐天子，安定庶民。而你却几次三番妄议废嫡长而立庶，岂不是蓄意谋反吗？
天下事在我，我今为之，谁敢不从？
天下之事，在皇帝，在诸位忠臣。你只不过是一篡逆之辈，又待怎样？
尔要试试我宝剑是否锋利吗？
我这也未尝不利。
And after this, Yuan Shao escapes Luoyang and organizes attacks with other warlords against Dongzhuo, and thus begins the Three Kingdoms, which doesn't really become the Three Kingdoms until at least a few decades after this. One of the first climax in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms was the three brothers fight against Lü Bu. And not to be that guy, but this is one of the scenes in the book with major historical issues. Now, first, the actual battle against Dongzhuo and Lü Bu was not at Hulaoguan. Luo Guanzhong, the author, is just shared geography, and it's been about 1,000 years since the actual event when he was writing the book. And it's understandable that he uses Hulaoguan because this is one of the most famous and most important guan or passes in Chinese history. So his readers would definitely feel more relatable and understand the importance of the battle if he places it at Hulaoguan. And since we're on the topic, let's talk about Hulaoguan for a little bit. Now, when you look at the map of Luoyang and what's surrounding it, you immediately notice that it's blocked off by the Yellow River. And there's many little branches coming out of it, which really tells you why Luoyang is important. Supplies can get to it very easily, and it's good for trade. Now, you're going to notice that Luoyang is not only cut off by the Yellow River, but there's a ton of mountains surrounding it. And it might not be that hard to cross in the present day. 2,000 years ago, it was a lot harder, just because of how untouched these mountains were. Not only was the mountains hard to cross, but it was protected further by the river Sishui, which was very rapid 2,000 years ago, and it has changed course since then. Hulaoguan is located right at the intersection between Sishui and the Yellow River. It's located in a region where it's the only flat land in between the Yellow River and Sishui and the mountains surrounding it. And pretty much, if you want to come through to Luoyang from the east side, you gotta pass Hulaoguan. Now, it's very hard to attack Hulaoguan and just win. Luckily, war is always about attrition, and as you can see here, Aocang, which is upbank of Hulaoguan, is an important granary that basically supplies Luoyang and its surrounding defenses. So what many generals will try to do when trying to get past Hulaoguan and into Luoyang is to attack Aocang first. Because if you control and cut off their attrition and supplies, then they can't really defend there for much longer. The actual pass where Lü Bu was defeated at was Taiguguan, where Sun Jian capitalized on Lü Bu's conflict with the other general that was also guarding this pass. Hu Zhen was the other general, and he has been under Dongzhuo for longer, and therefore he thinks he is better than Lü Bu and more qualified to take control. Sun Jian attacked while they were fighting it amongst themselves, and In this battle, Hua Xiong was killed directly by Sun Jian, which in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms was attributed to Guan Yu. And the second historical inaccuracy in this scene where the three brothers fight Lu Bu is just that it would have never happened in the late Han Dynasty on horseback. Early Western Han Dynasty cavalry tactics mainly revolved around horseback archery. Bows were common, but the real damage dealers were crossbows that had around 100 more meters of range on bows. And charging tactics was less popular, but cavalry was equipped with spears up to 2.5 meters and long knives up to 1.2 meters. And one of the main reasons why Western Han Dynasty cavalry tactics involves more archery than charging has to do with the technological side of things. You see, saddles weren't exactly a thing yet, so charging was a lot harder because the force of charging into the enemy can easily knock the riders off too. And cavalry in the Eastern Han Dynasty mainly improved in terms of the armor for the soldiers. Horse armor have remained relatively simple because there was no need for heavy cavalry yet. The main enemy of the Han Dynasty were nomadic cavalry archers with high mobility, so charging into them is not exactly possible. Which is another reason for the slow development of saddles. There are developments to the saddles in the Eastern Han Dynasty, though, as cantels were in use. And this allows cavalry to charge into enemy without getting knocked off. And as we approach the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty, the demand for charging cavalry significantly increased. And this is because civil war means that cavalry has to face heavy infantry, and you need to charge at heavy infantry. And at the time of the fictional fight between Liu Bu and the three brothers, saddles will not have been developed enough for them to fight like that, nor is horseback sword fighting or spear fighting an effective way for cavalry to fight. And this fight kind of takes away from Liu Bu's actual significance in history. He was not just some buff dude with incredible prowess, but really a pioneer in cavalry tactics. And for now, I'm just gonna hold that topic and talk about it in the next video.